Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is a summary of the podcast that was done on the Diary of the CEO with Dr. David Eaglesman, who is a Stanford neuroscientist and a technologist, basically study about the brain and how the brain function and how we human are, right? Based on what's it called, the functioning of our brain. Now, and in this podcast, like I said, I'm going to be giving you the summary of basically things that they discuss or things that happen on the podcast. And I'm going to be giving you the list of those ideas that was discussed. And then we're going to go into a one by one in terms of summary. Right? At the end of it, I'm going to be giving you what I got from the podcast personally, not in terms of the summary, but what message or what take I got from the podcast after watching it. So stay tuned for that. Now, what was discussed? The ideas that were discussed: one, the internal neural conflict, neuroplasticity, cognitive reserve, the purpose of dreaming, the use of AR, right? Now, not in particular order, but these were the ideas that were discussed on the podcast. Let's get into them one by one. The internal neural conflict. Now, this was one of the very first things they discussed. The moment the podcast started, the very first question that was pushed to him. Now, this was how this particular idea came forward, right? And he said, we humans usually think, or we people usually think, that we are the only decision makers, right? We control basically what happened to us and how we do everything in terms of making decisions. But he argued that that is not entirely the case, that we are full of different entities, or there are nuances in our body, right, that are pushing towards a different decision, right? He said, we are not a single decision maker, but rather a collection of conflicting verses. Basically, like I said, different systems in your body, in your brains, right, are pushing to you or pushing towards you different decisions, and you have to make this decision, right? And they are conflicting decisions at the time. And in the podcast, he also gave this analogy or example to Stephen, and he said, imagine I put up cookies before you right now. A part of your brain instantly gonna go, hey, cookies is a source of energy, right? We should eat it. It's good, it tastes good, sugar in it, and all of that. And then another part of your brain also gonna go, no, right? It's gonna make you fat. It's not good, considering the fact that maybe we have certain goal we're trying to gain in terms of weight loss and all of that. Maybe we shouldn't be having cookies right now. It's not good for our health, right? And another part of your brain might go, you can have the cookie right now, and then you go to the gym later. It's almost like a cancel out. So you see different things being pushed towards you. It's the whole idea that when people are trying to make decisions, they say things like, oh, one part of my brain said this, another part of my brain said that, right? So it's that you have different decisions being pushed towards you. And it's very interesting, right? Especially from the religious standpoint or the religious view of it, the devil versus God, or the good side versus the bad side, in that analogy. It's an interesting idea, a very, very much interesting idea, because basically you have two, three, four conflicting ideas, and he said they usually form, and in neuroscience they usually fall into two different categories, right? Which is the limbic system, which is responsible for immediate gratification, and then you also have the prefrontal cortex, right, which is also responsible for your long-term goals. So like the analogy that he gave, so eating the cookies right now, that would be the limbic system at work, and then you refusing not to eat the cookies because you prefer your health and you have a goal in terms of maybe losing weight and all of that. The prefrontal cortex will be responsible for that. Now, and he said, in terms of making decision and what helps people to be able to make the right decision at times, is this idea that he also brought forward was the Ulysses Contract, which basically means, right, you doing things right now that will help you, right, in the future to overcome or to not fall or not despair of your whims, or not despair of your desire. Let's just put it like that. So you're doing things right now, like let's say you are an alcoholic, right? And you trying to recover from that. You're trying to get away or not do alcohol no more. So he said maybe people will often decide, okay, I'm gonna get rid of every single alcohol from my cabinet, right? Or you what's it called, upon added, you decide, okay, every single app, every single thing that I'm using to watch pornography, every other site, I'm getting rid of it, or every single one of them. Now, the reason you're doing that, right, is to kind of helps you in the future, because the desire will come, the urge will come, but now once it's not around, right, you put yourself in the position, or in a more likely position, to be able to overcome that urge, as compared to it being around and you looking at it, right? So he said, the Ulysses Contract helps you in terms of decision making when it comes to the internal neural conflict, right? When different decisions are being pushed at you and you're trying to make the right one for your future or what is to come, the Ulysses Contract, that helps you. So we see every one of us, each and every one of us, do that at certain point in our life, right? It doesn't matter. It may not be huge, but you at some point have done that. Like, you make a decision now, or you did something that, okay, maybe you know that you're supposed to do something around 2 o'clock, and you also have this thing to do right now. But if you don't do it, once 2 o'clock comes, this particular thing right now will be conflicting with what you have to do at 2 o'clock. So you do it so that when 2 o'clock reaches, right, what you're supposed to do at that point, you can be able to do them. Now, you get the idea. So the Ulysses Contract helps you in terms of decision making. So it's like a decision that you make now that helps you in the future to overcome your whims, to overcome your desire when the need be. Another idea that was introduced in this podcast, right, was neuroplasticity, right? This is the idea that talks about how our brain is able to adapt, or we human, what makes us human adaptable, right? It's the restructuring of our brain based on our experiences and other things. So, for instance, if you try learning new things, your brain automatically restructure. If you do something new, so it's basically and your brain restructure based on what you do repeatedly, the works that you do, the things that you are involved in repeatedly, or what you say repeatedly, or even what you think repeatedly, right? So that's why you see people talk about, watch what you say and all of these things. So now there's the neuroscience backing behind it, because based on what you think repeatedly, your brain kind of takes that and then kind of turns that, it becomes a part of you. And based on what you also do repeatedly, your brain also takes that and then kind of, that's why when you see people telling you, when you're learning anything, and they often tell you, right, repetition helps, right? Because that's how your brain learns. And once your brain takes that in, it becomes a part of you. Then it gets to the point in your life where you can just do that where you don't even have to struggle. You don't even have to do a whole bunch of things, right? It kind of just happens. It almost like an algorithm has been set up inside of you, that even when your eyes are closed, you can just do this thing without any struggle, without anything. And he talks about, like somebody that is professional juggler. Now he referred to, what's his name, Steven, as that. Let's say, imagine if Steven is a professional juggler, right? He said you can be able to tell a difference between, somebody that has mastered something and somebody that haven't mastered something. He said, their brain chemistry and their neurons, all of these things tell you, because when it's happening for somebody that haven't mastered it, it's like there's too much going on in their head at the moment, where it's like, okay, let's say they're juggling, now they're worrying, okay, I have to position my hands in a certain way. Now, what do I do so that when this thing comes back, I can grab it, or something like that? Maybe even a soccer ball. You worrying about how to position your body, how to hit the ball, even that it comes back to you. Not necessarily worrying, but you're thinking about all of these different things, as compared to somebody that actually have mastered it. There is less thought process in that moment. It's like they just do it, and their brain is not, there's not so much energy is being involved anymore. It's more like, like I said, it's like an algorithm that has been set up right in the brain. So now once they say, okay, it's juggling, we already know what to do. So the information is sent throughout the body and everything to the legs or your hands or whatever part of your body, and you know what to do. So neuroplasticity, right, is basically our ability to adapt into different situations, and like the restructuring of the brain. So that's how we learn new things. That's how we do new things. That's how we connect with with different things. It's also, maybe the destruction of old behavior and adapting new pattern as well. That's what neuroplasticity is all about. And this is interesting because if you think about the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex, because the limbic system is basically something has to do with things that you're comfortable with, like we talk about, right? You already know them, you're comfortable with them, it's suiting to you, right? Your brain always present this thing because it's more difficult learning new things, like the prefrontal cortex will always suggest for you to do in terms of your long-term goal. It's basically you doing things that you are not necessarily comfortable with, right? So neuroplasticity, right, works in alliance with what's it called, the prefrontal cortex, right? So you try something new, you're doing something new, right? Even if it's the realignment of your or learning certain habits or certain behavior that is already used to you work in alliance with the prefrontal cortex. And I think that really is interesting. Cognitive reserve is your brain ability to cope with damage or aging without showing obvious symptoms, right? When he said this, right, or introduced the idea, he talks about Alzheimer's, how there are some people that show early signs of Alzheimer's, and there are certain people that don't really show signs of Alzheimer's until even they are dead. And then he mentioned the nun, right, where there was a study done there was a study that was done on the brains of dead nuns. So they basically donated their brain to science or to be able to do some studies on them. And they discovered some of them had Alzheimer's, but they couldn't really show any, they didn't really show any signs of Alzheimer's until their death. And part of the reason was because they, was in this nunnery or was in this convent with their fellow sisters. They were doing all of this activity. And what he's saying is this, like what reserve your cognitive function is when you are engaging in several different activities, right? Doing different things, even things, difficult things helps you. So doing new things, difficult things helps your cognitive ability. So as you decline, because your cognitive function, right, also, what's it called? It decline as you age. It's not as good as you see that with old people nowadays. Their cognitive function is not as sharp as they were when they were in their maybe their 20s or whatever, in their prime, let's say it like that. But he said your cognitive function, right, can be reserved based on the activities that you do and what you do, and engaging with other people, even in conversation. And he talks about how, like, engaging with other people is actually really good because you don't know what they're going to do. You don't know what they're going to say. You don't know how they're going to react. So it's like you have to think on the spot. You have to react on the spot. Everything is on the spot. So it's like even your brain don't know what he's going to say to certain things because it's all in the moment. So that's what interaction with other people. And also he said doing new things, doing even more difficult things kind of helps you, right, with your cognitive reserve. So as you get old, you're not necessarily losing your cognitive function, right? Like you lose it, but it's not as drastic as it would be as compared to people that didn't really do much, right? So like those are the people that are more likely you see show early signs of Alzheimer's and all of that, as compared to people that are involved doing activity, doing difficult things, maybe going to the gym, not necessarily going to the gym, but doing things that you are not necessarily comfortable with. That's how I mentioned the idea of the idea that was introduced by Huberman, that when you do difficult things, certain part of your brain expand, right? The anterior something cortex, I don't know, mid cortex, I'm forgetting what exactly it is. So whatever you do difficult in that part of your brain, absolutely do expand. And that's what Dr. Eagleman is also trying to say when he introduced this idea of the cognitive reserve. So you see the word reserve basically kind of tells you like you're reserving your cognitive function by doing these little activities that you do and getting involved. And it will also tell you when people get older, where you go to these like retirement homes and all of that, right? You see, they try to put these people in different situation that kind of helps them use their brain, at least get them cognitively active, right? Like I saw a video on the internet the other day where it's like a place in China or somewhere, where it's like you see other people playing games wherein they have to arrange the colors or put the they throwing balls at them and they have to put them in the right bin, in the right bin and all of that different colors. So if it's blue, they have to put it in blue and it's coming at them fast. This little thing kind of helps them with their cognitive function as well. And I think that's the point the man was trying to drive home here, right? And then another idea that he talks about, or not necessarily idea, right? But this one is more like a theory. He talks about the purpose of dreaming, right? And this is interesting. And the reason being is this. The purpose of dreaming is to defend the visual system from being taken over by the sensory part, by other sensory part of our brain. So it's like, you know how, he said, you know how if somebody is blind, right? It's like that particular, they are blind, so their visual system is gone. It's not functioning. And other system within their brain or other sensory system, like their feelings, their touch, their hearing, now takes over. So those other part becomes really heightened, right? So if somebody is deaf, you see the other part of their sensory become really heightened because they now take over that. And he's saying it's a theory that we dreaming, right? When we close our eye, we dream, we enter REM, R-E-M, so it's like a rapid eye movement. He said that's what happened. So those images being flashed every 90 minutes or so, I think 90 minutes or 90 seconds. He said it's our brain way of protecting the visual system so that it doesn't really get taken over by the other sensory part of our brain, which I find really, really interesting. Now, it's a theory. Now, it's not something that, has been proven. I know maybe other people will have different interpretation as to why we dream and all of that, maybe in terms of it's a message from the gods, or it's a message from God, or it's a projection of our thoughts. But he didn't dispute any one of that, or he didn't really get into any one of that. He's just saying that one of the neurological reason why we dream is that our brain is trying to protect our visual system, or the visual part of our brain, so that we don't lose that, so that other parts of our brain don't takes over that, which I found really, really interesting. And this was not necessarily the last idea that was discussed in the book. I think the dream was the last idea that was discussed as a book in the podcast, but the AI, right, discussion, it lasts really long in the podcast. And they talk about how you can basically use AI, or how we're supposed to use AI, which I found interesting. And he called himself a cyber optimist, right? Which is the sense like he feel like the internet, contrary to what other believe in, what other things, that the internet is making people stupid, the internet is making people dumb. He thinks the internet is going to make, or AI is going to make people more smarter than previous generation, which, kind of makes sense to understand. And his point is this. He said when he was growing up, right, and most of us might have experienced the same thing, especially if you're from a third world country, you might relate to him more, even if you might be been born maybe 10 years, 20 years before you can still relate, because from a third world country, because I know I relate to what he said. In a sense, like, if he wanted to study or read about an idea or something, his mom would drive him to the library, and then he have to open his encyclopedia or something, or concordance, whatever it is, and then go through it, and then maybe, okay, this, right? And hopefully there's an article in there, or or letter in there, or something in there that talks about what he's looking for. As compared to today, wherein you can just, take up your phone, ask ChatGPT, or ask Google, not just ChatGPT, but you have Gemini, you have Gronk, you have all these other AI too. You go on the internet, you just ask questions, and now information is given you. So now the opportunity to be even more smarter than previous generation, because now in today's generation, there's constant information being released at each and every one of us, right? Which is absolutely true. So he thinks that this generation, or the coming generation, will be smarter than the previous generation, which I also definitely do think is true. Because another thing that he also make reference to in the podcast was the fact that when compared to other species and other organism, right, when a human come to the scene, right, they learn about everything that was done by other human before, and then they look at that, go, okay, great, now let's see what we can do with that, basically. So it's almost like they continue from where the other people stop, as compared to other species, which is not necessarily the case, because you kind of see, like he said, if you look at a horse right now, right? A horse is born. A horse will do the exact same thing other horses did maybe a decade, 100 years, 50 years, century ago, right? Do the exact same thing as compared to human. We kind of evolve, get better, get better, get better, and that's partly because of the information that we have accessible to us. So you kind of see people get smaller and smaller. But then they also get into the discussion of AI and how we're supposed to use AI. And Stephen asked him the question, how can I, what's it called? Use AI as an edge, or how can I edge it, considering the fact that other people also have access to AI? And they were going through it. It's like, one thing he says, like, you should talk to AI, right? Have conversation with AI instead of just trying to copy and paste and take what AI gives you, right? Talk to AI if you have idea, because Stephen asked him, how should I communicate with AI? He said, talk to AI. Tell AI about your idea and tell the AI, whether it's ChatGPT, Gemini, tell them, okay, this is what I'm thinking. Tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong. And I did that because I'm reading this book called The Genealogy of Moral by Nietzsche. I had an idea or theory or whatever, and I put it into ChatGPT, this particular idea, into ChatGPT, and I told ChatGPT, right, to be honest with me, right, give me its view if my idea, right, is a good reflection of the book. And it came back to me and said, not quite, right? It kind of hurts a bit because, you want the things like, oh my gosh, your idea is absolutely spot on. But it turns out my idea was not, it came back to me and said, not quite. It said, I'm not far off, but not quite. And I understand what it means, right? It's like, and what ChatGPT told me is like, I get the understanding of the book, but the reference I'm trying to make, right, or the analogy I'm trying to make is opposite from what Nietzsche, which is the author of the book, will do. And, which was a great understanding. So it's talking about, instead of just copying and pasting everything AI say or AI does for us, we should have a better conversation with AI. And in that way, where you put in the effort. And what I actually learned, or I took away from the entire podcast, was the idea is like, people value effort, right? That when you put effort into something, and say, which is what people are losing nowadays with AI, we are not really applying effort no more. So it's like, he said, if you don't apply effort, people actually do see it, right? Even though it's AI that is helping you, people do see it, and they can recognize the fact that you don't really apply effort. And he gave a demonstration of two different arts. He said, I gave you an art with just like a red dots on like a white canvas. And then another art wherein you see maybe a structure complex put together by glue and all of that. You look at that, you're going to appreciate the other one better, the structure more than the one with the dots, right? Because you feel like this one, more effort was put into it as compared to the one with the dot. And it's the same thing. He also talked about, he said, a diamond being made in the lab and a diamond being found, maybe a natural diamond. He said people appreciate the natural diamond than the one made in the lab. So that was one of the things that I took away from the podcast, that you should apply effort, even though it's AI, it's going to make things easier for you, going to make your entire life easier. And he said this, he said, there are things we should definitely ask AI to do. We shouldn't even struggle with that. Like if you have something that you have to organize, put into an Excel sheet or whatever that you have to fill in cell by cell, he said, put that into AI. Let AI do that for you. But when it comes to maybe understanding this thing, you have a better conversation of AI, because then you live in with more knowledge. It's not just you just copying and pasting, because then you don't even know what you just did. You can't even explain what you just did. Now, and for us that in the computer science world, we can absolutely maybe relate to that a bit more, because when you building a website or you coding about something, let's just say whatever it is, it's easier for you to just put that in there and then ask AI to kind of give you the code, and AI will absolutely give you the code and you call it a day. But at the end result, you don't know what exactly you're doing, and if you do that continuously, you don't know what your code is about. If something is wrong in the code and they ask you to fix it, you cannot quite fix it, because you weren't the one that wrote it and you don't exactly know what to do, as compared to you, having a conversation with AI, and AI maybe explaining to you every single bit of what is happening. So now you're living, even though AI may have gave you an idea about something, but you also living. It's almost like you generated that idea because you put in the the rightful prompt and you have the right conversation with AI, that when you live in, right, you live with something instead of just nothing at all and you just copy and paste. So it was just the idea that effort, people value effort, and we should apply a bit more effort as well. And then another idea, another thing that I also left with from the podcast was the like how people like things that are new but familiar, right? So they would rather be, they want things that are new but familiar. So it's almost like their brain don't want, too complication, but it also wants something new. So you want something strange, but at least also familiar. So it's like that's how kind of like our brain works. So it's new, but yet, it's also familiar. So it's not far off. It kind of helps, especially when you're trying to transition into something new, like just something that's just a huge jump into something else. And of course, it's problem, or cause most people to kind of refrain from everything, as compared to you just kind of taking your time and going through it, and then it's like you listen to it, it's new and all that. Because they also talk about the fact that when you listen to a song, sometimes some of the song for the first time you don't like it, and I can relate to that. Like if you know Thames, this Afrobeat musician. The very first time I listened to her songs, I didn't like none of them. But then my roommate, when I was in college, he played this particular song over and over, over and over, over and over, that I just like it. That I really just like it. Now, it became, it's like something that we bonded upon. But from the beginning, I didn't really like it, because when he told me about her, I was like, yeah, I don't really rate her that much. But then he played this song in the room over and over, that I ended up liking the song. So it's like we want a bit of familiarity, but yet new. So it's like that was basically the two ideas that the two lessons that I personally learned, that when you go through life, you want that are new, but yet familiar, right? So there isn't too much of a difference between them, right? So that's really, really interesting to me. So basically, that's what the podcast was all about, and hopefully you learn something. Now, again, I would appreciate if you can hit the like, hit the subscribe, and show me some love on this video. But if you can also go and watch the entire podcast, I would advise you do. But thank you very much, and hopefully this video was a help. See you in the next one. Adios.